Okay, Ryan and Richard, let's go ahead and get started. I just sent out email that lesson 12 you guys are just going to cover on your own. All it's going to do is just going to show you what the Mac OS looks like, what Windows looks like, and what Linux looks like. So it's just for you to look at the differences in the operating systems. You know that all the operating systems have the same functionality, right? Except that they have their own set of commands that are unique to them. Sean, we're just starting lesson 13. So let's go ahead and get started. We had a great class the last time. I'm glad you guys got to dismantle that PC and put it back together. If you had a little bit of experience, at least you got to do it again. If you didn't, you got to do it. And like I said, later on, if we can do it one more time, whoever wants to do it. But anyway, having said that, let's look at lesson 13, installing and troubleshooting operating systems. So now we've seen three operating systems, right? In lesson 12 is you have for the Apple or for the Mac, you have for Linux, and you have Windows. So here the objectives is to perform the operating system installations and upgrades, right? You have to install the operating system for the computer can be functional, and it can come up and allow you to log in and do everything that gets done on a PC, correct, class? Install and configure applications. So we know once we have an operating system, we can install applications, for example, Microsoft Office, Adobe Acrobat, and whatever the other applications you need to use. And also troubleshoot Windows OS problems. As you already realized by now, things don't run by themselves. Somebody has to maintain them. So, when we talk about networking, right, you have to maintain the network. Well, the same for the operating system. Something's going to happen, and you're going to have to go see why certain things are happening. So you have to troubleshoot. Okay, so perform OS installations and upgrades. So you have a new system. You want to install the operating system. Let's see what options they show here. Installation and upgrade consideration. So you have to consider certain things when you're going to install the operating system. There you see attended installations. What that means is that, for example, let's say you have the CD that has Windows 10 or 11. You put it on the CD drive or DVD drive of the computer, and then it starts doing the install. It's going to prompt you if you want to install, and you're going to respond to the prompts that you get. So attended installations, you got to be there so you can keep answering any prompts that come up. If you're not there to answer those prompts, the system will just sit there and wait. Clean install versus in-place upgrade is another thing that we'll look at. Upgrade considerations, like the hardware compatibility. Making sure that you have enough memory, that your processor is compatible with the operating system that you're installing. What else? Application and driver support and backwards compatibility as well. So let's just say that you install a certain operating system. Is it still going to support backwards compatibility for older legacy technology? Can legacy technology, be able to run the new operating system? And then backup files and user preferences, we'll look at that. And then obtain third-party drivers. So we already know what drivers are, right? That's what makes the components work. Sometimes you need third-party drivers if you have less known computer components. Microsoft might not have the driver integrated into the Windows operating system, but that doesn't matter. You just go to the vendor website, you go to support, and you can do the download of the drivers. And then feature updates as well. So we'll see what those are. So the unattended installation is another one. Here you have an answer file, and then you can also do an image deployment. So here, when we saw the attended installation, right, that means you're there. It prompts you, whether you want to get the installation started, if it's going to be an update or a fresh install, or a clean install. And then later on, if you want to enter the product key, and then later on, it'll ask for other things. So you're going to be on the network and so on and so forth, right? So if you're not there, the installation will stall and wait for you to come and reply to what it's asking. Well, if you said, I have 20 machines I have to install today, I can't sit in front of the machine and do the installation and be waiting to get the prompts because I got to move quickly to the other machines. Well, that one, what you can do is you can do the what they call the unattended installations. Here, because you have the experience of doing the installation, you know what prompts it's going to ask. Let's say it was going to ask six prompts that you have to respond to. Well, you create a file, let's say a notepad, just like Microsoft Word. You open it up and you type in the answers. So you, for the first line, you put in the answer for the first prompt. You press the enter key and you type the answer for the second prompt and all the way down to the sixth prompt, and then you save the file, you give it a name. So when you run your installation, you're going to put in, you're going to do the install, and it's going to be unattended, and then you're going to specify where your answer file is located. For example, C:\/ installation folder, for example. And then once you launch the install, when the first prompt shows up, because you already pointed to the answer file where it's located, it would go into that file and look at the first that it would take. And then as you proceed, let me mute it up. Okay. And then the second prompt shows up, let's say 10 minutes later, because you directed it at the beginning to go to the answer file. It'll go there and look at the second entry in that file, and so on. So this way, you don't have to be there waiting on the prompts. So the installation started, and then you move on to the next computer, and you do the same thing, unattended installation, and you put the answer file on the next computer. It's just copying the file wherever you're going to put it, and when you run installation or setup, you specify, like I said, C drive / installation folder / answer file. Let's say that's what you called it. And then it'll know, and then you get that started and you move on. So this is the way to do a lot of installations in quicker time than having to wait for each machine to fully install before moving on. Another thing they show in here is the image deployment. Okay, the image deployment, let me give you a good example. You know, like the college, you know, in the classroom, the images in the classroom are the same. You have the operating system, and then you have all the applications installed. You have the network functioning, the network card. If there was a printer, it would have the printer configuration, and anything that needed to be installed. So normally the best way is to create what I call a model machine. So a model machine is a machine that's going to have everything that's needed, okay, for the user, you know, to function. In a school environment, it's ideal because all the students require the same thing. They require Windows 10 or Windows 11 to have the network functioning, to have Microsoft Office installed, to have Adobe Acrobat, and whatever else class is the case. Okay, Richard, we need to keep you muted, okay? So I'm gonna mute you again. Oh, there we go, we're good. So anyway, once you create this model machine, then there's software, for instance, one that's widely used by school districts is called CASE, KACE. When you create that machine that has everything that's needed at the company, then you take an imaging software. Let's say in this case you use CASE, no pun intended there, and you capture the image. And once you capture that image, it's like that model machine you created, and then you go to the next machine, and that image. Let's say you saved it onto a DVD, for example. You put your DVD on the other machine, and then you launch the CASE, and then CASE will copy that image to the new machine. And the thing about the image is that the image will install the machine in about 5 minutes. Let's say that the initial installation took about 3 hours to set everything up the way it was needed. But after that, you go and you capture the image with a soft capturing, they call it a hard disk imaging, and whatever software you use. I'm using the example of Case because I'm familiar with that. And then after that, you go to every machine you need to install, and you put that CD or DVD that has the image, and it'll put it on that machine in, like I said, in about 5 minutes. So you could do 20 machines, whatever 20 times 5 minutes is, very, very fast, as opposed to taking an hour to do each individual machine. You do it real fast, image deployment. And then you might want to save that image in case a machine later on fails somewhere. All you have to do is go fix the failure. But if the operating system got corrupted, take the image and reload it really quick. I know people that work for a school district, and sometimes they do have that problem, and a certain machine is not working, and the student needs to have that machine. They just go over there, and right there on the spot, they can image it. So that is like doing an installation, but it's a different approach to installing the operating system and the whole machine with the applications. It's not like all in one bundle, and they call that imaging. Boot methods. Okay, boot device priority. Okay, we've talked about this before, especially when we talk about the BIOS or the UEFI. When you turn on your machine, the first place it's going to go look for the operating system is going to be on a certain drive. Okay, so let's say it's the DVD. If you don't have the operating system on the DVD, it's going to install. It's going to tell you operating system not found. Okay, so you have to go in there. You have to take the DVD out of the DVD drive, and then it'll continue onto the next drive. And if the next drive is a C drive, then it'll get Windows 10 and load it up, and then your machine comes up. So it's a good idea. So in the boot device priority, to put the drive that has the operating system to be the number one. This way, when it goes to load the operating system, when you turn on the machine, it'll find it right away on the C drive. Why have it go look at the DVD when you know it's not there? Okay, that's what that means. So in the BIOS, you can go in there and specify. You can specify that. Again, optical media, or you're going to boot up from a USB. You have options. You can have the operating system on the USB. Or you're going to boot up from the network. Some operating systems can be loaded on a server on the network. And when you turn on your machine, they have special network cards that have a feature called PXE, PXE. And PXE, when you configure that network card, you specify the IP address of the server that has the Windows operating system. And when the computer's turned on, it goes over the network and loads Windows 10 from a server. And then your system comes up. That's another way of having the boot up of your machine. And then the other one, dynamic host configuration protocol. Well, we know what this does. This gives out the IP addresses automatically. Right, class? And then we have remote installation server. You can also remote install where you have the operating system on a server, and then from that location where your server is located, you can push out the operating system to the machines over the network. So you don't even have to walk over to the user's machine. As long as they're on the network, and you can see them on your network, then you can, there's a command to push out the operating system. So let's say you were installing several computers that were in Dallas and you're in Houston. You can push out the OS to those machines remotely. It's another way to deploy, the installation of the operating system. Internet-based, if there's anything that's on the internet that can be downloaded. And then you have the internal hard drive partition. Last class, we talked about the partition, remember? To prepare a drive to be usable, what do you have to do? You have to go to computer management, and within computer management option, you go where? To a disk management, right? And there, how do you prepare your drive? You'll see disk 0, and you right click, and then you select the option partition, right? And the partition is going to ask you how much drive space do you need on this drive. And if you want it all, you specify, you'll see that the size there in your screen that appears. And you can say if it was 479, like the example we saw in the last class, you type in that and use the whole space. And once the partition is configured, then the next step is what? If you remember, format, right? And in the well, before the format, in the partition, it'll ask you what drive letter do you want to give this drive. And normally, if it's your first drive, you want to say the C drive. If it was a second drive, you might want to say D drive, and so on. And once that's done, the partitioning, then what do? You format it, if you remember. But anyway, here in this advanced option, you can specify, the type of boot that you want, the boot methods. So the disk configuration, the partitioning style, when it does the partitioning, it creates something at the beginning of that drive. It's called the MBR, the Master Boot Record. And in the Master Boot Record, it has that record there that when you turn on your machine, the first thing it's going to do is going to go look at your hard drive where the operating system is located, and it's going to look at the first track of that drive, and there it should have the MBR. And then the MBR is what triggers the continuation of loading your operating system so your computer can come up and you can log in. If this MBR gets corrupted, let's say a virus infects your system and it corrupts your MBR, your system's not going to come up. But there's ways to recover, and you can recopy the MBR. But for now, I'm just telling you this so you can understand the importance of that. Even though it's only a couple of sectors on track one, it's very important because that's what gets the uploading of the operating system initiated. And then here they also talk about primary versus extended partitions. We talked about partitioning your hard drive. The drive that's where you're going to install the operating system, where you're going to install Windows. When you partition, it's going to ask you what drive letter, and then it also is going to ask, do you want this partition to be a primary partition or an extended partition? So the primary partition is what you want to select because that's where it goes and looks for the operating system. If you would have specified extended partition, the system then would not go to the extended partition to look for an operating system. It just will not operate extended partitions or partitions that you set up later, but those are only to store your data and install your application, your programs. So remember, keep this in mind. When you're setting up a new machine and you're setting up the C drive to install Windows on it, make sure that when you partition it, you specify that it's a primary partition, because it'll have the option there to specify whether you want primary or extended, and you will want to say primary. If you have a second drive, let's say the D drive, and you say, this one, when you're going to install the operating system, so I'm just going to say extended partition. I just need it for data, and I just need it for the applications. In also class, sometimes, as I said, if you have a very large drive, let's say it was 1 terabyte, and you say, I'm going to partition this drive, and it's only one single drive, but you're going to say, I want 300 gig to be drive C. That's why I'm going to install the operating system. I'm going to make it the primary partition. Well, you said 300 gig, but it's a 1 terabyte, so you're still going to have 700 gig left over on the same single drive. Then you can go back and continue and do a second partition on that same drive, but now it's going to be on the space that was left over. So if you have, let's say, 700 left, you say, okay, the next 350 gig, I'm going to partition that, and I'm going to say that's the D drive. And then I said, that's going to be extended partition. And then you have 350 gig left still. Then you can say, I'm going to partition that, and that's going to be the E drive. And that's also an extended partition. And then to the user, when they go to Explore to see their folders, they'll see 3 drives, the C, D, and E, even though physically there's only 1 drive. But in your partitioning, you separate it into 3 different drives. But keep in mind, the first one, primary partition, because that's where the system, the MBR, is going to send directions to go load up a Windows. That's where it'll find it in the primary partition. And that primary partition also, one more thing that you'll do, and you'll see it in the options, besides specifying primary partition, it's going to ask you, do you want this to be the active partition? Always say active for that first drive, because the active partition is where it will go and look for the operating system. Why is this important? Because let's say you had a second physical drive, a second one, and you installed the second physical drive, and you partition it and format it. And let's say that you specified a primary partition as well, also. Well, okay, so now you got two primary partitions. Where is the system going to look for Windows? The system will always look for Windows on the partition that's a primary partition that's been designated as active partition. So if the second drive you set primary, but they're not designated as active, it'll never go look for the operating system on that drive. So remember, active partition always on the primary drive where you have Windows. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Okay. So what other things to remember? Set the partition to be primary, and follow that up with specifying it's the active partition. This way you have three primary partitions. It can guess where the operating system is. It'll automatically say, where is the active one? That's where I'm going. I don't care about the other ones. So keep that. That's a rule of thumb. Remember that. A globally unique identifier partition on table GPT. The newer computers use a different way of specifying, like the MBR. They call it the GPT, and they have a unique identifier for the partition, but it's behind the scenes, and that's how it activates the partitions using the GPT process instead of the MBR. So in any newer machines, they'll use this. It's more efficient way of how it handles things. We don't do anything other than the fact that it'll say, like, do you want to do MBR or GPT? The new ones say GPT, but you can still do MBR. That's what you want to do. And then the drive format. Remember, partition first, and then what? Format. So in your partition, you say, okay, I'm going to partition. I'm going to say it's a primary partition, and I'm going to say it's the active partition. Once my drives have been partitioned, then I have to follow up with what? Formatting of the drive. And that's where you're going to designate what drive letter you give. So if you have three drives, you format one, you say this is the C drive, you format the second one, this is the D drive, you format the third, this is the E drive. This configuration, you can see the second partition can be created as an extended partition. Here, as we can see here, you have the primary partition. This is where the operating system is going to go. Think of it as this right here. It's one physical disk drives. But because you only use this much space, because you say this is enough to put my Windows 10 or 11, and it still has, let's say, 200 gig left over for anything that I want to save there as well. The extra space that's left, I'm going to partition, I'm going to section it off as well. And I'll partition this one, and let's say, like I said earlier, you say this is, let's say, 300 gig. Now you say this is the D drive. And you say, I still have some space. This is 400 gig, so I'll partition that to 400 gig. And this, I'll give it the drive letter C, this the drive letter D, and this the drive letter E. And now, again, it appears to be 3 disks, but really, physically, it's only one. These are called logical disks, because really, it's just make-believe, a separate drive. When it's not, it's only one drive. So again, you can see here the primary partition, and you have your extended partitions, logical partitions. And that's the way the hard drives are set up. Once this is done, you are ready. You're ready to go. You're ready to install the operating system and do whatever it is that you have to do. But again, to get things functioning, think about you're building a new machine. You have to go through the process of partitioning and formatting. Repair installation, recovery partition, OEM factory reset, boot from internal recovery partition. When the system installs Windows 10 or 11, okay, class, when it installs it, it's going to allocate a certain section, just not that much, but it's going to be a certain section of the drive, that's known as the recovery partition. It's done automatically when you partition the drive. It does it automatically. So when you install Windows, it creates that reserved space for Windows system files. If your window gets corrupted for whatever reason, some of your system files, it will recover from this section that was reserved for Windows system files. That makes it so easy for us, class. We don't even have to go search for a CD that has a Windows 10 or Windows 11. It's already put critical files there for us, so it can be handy for us when something gets corrupted with the system. We can recover quickly because it's right there on the disk. It recopies the good file for the recovery area to the area where the file is located that's been corrupted. The OEM factory reset, that is, if you have the original manufacturer CD, I used to have my own consulting firm, and I built a lot of systems, and I sold them. And I had my OEM disk that has a Windows system files, and I would use that to recover corrupted files. But because they've done this now, they've done us a big favor. They made our job so easy because the files to recover corruption is there right there at our fingertips. Reset Windows, refresh versus complete reset. Sometimes if you do need to reset Windows, you can just by installing certain files, or if you have to just reinstall all of the system files, you can specify. Here, I put the CD in there, grab all the system files, and reset my system. So these are ways to recover when the operating system begins to act up. So we look at what class? Installation and upgrade considerations. Let me pause here for a minute. They may mention it later, but installation and upgrade considerations. So installation, when you do a fresh install, okay, that means that the disk is blank, there's nothing there, or whatever's there, you're going to erase in your format, and you're going to install what they call a clean installation, everything from scratch. The upgrade is when you already have an operating system. For example, you have Windows 7, and you say, I have to install Windows 10. We're upgrading. So if that's the case, you already have Windows 7 with all your programs, all your applications, so you don't want to blow that away. So when you put the CD for Windows 10 to upgrade Windows 7, it will ask you, do you want to do a clean install or do you want to do an upgrade? So in that case, you would say, I'm going to do an upgrade because I don't want to erase my programs and my configurations and any of my settings. And this way, this will only upgrade the operating system files. So that's the difference. One's a clean install, the other one upgrades what's there already. And then remember the unintended installations, that you have a file that has the answers to the prompts, that it will go to that file and look for the answer for the first prompt. The second prompt, it'll look at the second entry in your file, and it selects that as your answer, and so on. And then we did look at the different boot methods, your disk configuration, and repair installation. All right, install and configure applications. So now you say, okay, great, I've got the system up and running. We have Windows 10 installed. Users are, computers are already to go, but we still have to put what is needed by the users. And what's that? Well, those are the programs that need to do their work. You know that the accountants are going to need programs that have to do with accounting, right? QuickBooks, Intuit software, and anything else to manage the ledger, debits and credits and all that, right? Sales is going to need their programs that have to do with sales. HR, there are programs that have to do with human resources, right? Employee master files and also payroll applications and all that. So once the system has been configured properly, now you're ready to start doing the install. And one thing to consider one more time is when you go into install the applications, make sure that you have the proper computing power, right? Your CPU, your processor. In the application specifications, they'll tell you what are the hardware requirements to run that application. So make sure you have that. Make sure you have enough memory to run that program. Make sure you have enough disk capacity to hold the program and any files that are going to be created. So anyway, make sure of that. Of course, the CPU, you're going to have to consider the speed of the CPU. Okay, and by looking at the specifications of the program, what it needs, you'll confirm that you do have the right competent processor to run that program. And then features, hardware-assisted virtualization, a trusted platform, a module, a TPM. This is if you are going to start working with encryption and certificates for security. These are things that can be enabled in the BIOS or in the UEFI to make those features operate, to allow you to encrypt and use certificates. And then make sure you have enough memory, right? RAM, random access memory, and disk-free space requirements. So make sure you have enough disk-free space. Normally, with the modern computers, they're always very capable, very competent. But always good to look at it. Take a second look and make sure that your systems can handle what you're going to install. Dedicated graphics card requirements. If you are going to need some special graphics cards. You see here integrated CPU or chipset adapter versus dedicated add-in cards. Yesterday or last class, y'all were working on the computer, right? Working with the components, right? And I heard the question that was asked. What are these slots for, right? So, well, we know that a motherboard has what? They have integrated components, right? Like a network card, a sound card, and other things like that. The slots were for what? And one of the words that came up was PCI, right? That is if you don't have the integrated components and you need additional additional components to run, and they're not part of the integrated ones, what do? You go to the store, you buy that component, and it's in the form of a card that snaps into the slot, right? And now you upgraded your system, giving it extra capability. So again, just keep in mind you have integrated components, but you can always expand. Those cards are called what? Expansion cards, right? They're called expansion cards for a reason. They're expanding the functionality of your system. Video RAM requirements. If you're in an environment that uses a lot of graphics, right? Maybe you work in a graphics department and you run some applications that are graphics intensive. Those require a lot of memory, but memory, that's dedicated to graphics applications, graphics processes. So make sure that your graphics can handle the workload of graphics programs. External hard drive token requirements. Sometimes if you do have external hard drives, you have a certain adapter that connects to where the external hard drive is going to connect on your computer. So you connect this component to your computer, and then it's like an adapter, and then your hard drive connects to this adapter. And this is then an in between your computer and the external hard drive. And whoever holds that token can connect the hard drive. In this way, you can use this external hard drive. Somebody doesn't have that, and they connect their hard drive, the computer's not going to acknowledge the hard drive. This is a safety measure, so it's just not anybody can go up to any computer and start stealing data and copying the data to their hard drive. So you'll find these in high secure environments by having that and go between your computer and the hard drive. If whoever holds that component is the ones that can add or remove data onto that hard drive, or copy data from your computer to the hard drive, or from the hard drive to your computer. Here, always requirements for applications. Again, you got to have that compatibility. Windows, Mac OS version. So here, and Linux distributions. Okay. In chapter 12, you'll see the differences in the operating systems. They all have the same basic function, except they have their own set of commands, right? But if you have a Windows computer and you need to install an application, when you go to the store, don't buy the version that's for a Mac OS, because that application is to install on a Mac computer, not on a Windows, and vice versa. Don't buy a Windows program to try to install on the Mac computer. It's not going to take it, and to the Linux as well, class. Okay, so keep that in mind, the compatibility, because Apple programs don't run on PC computers, and PC programs do not run on Apple computers or Linux. And then 32-bit versus 64-bit. This is something we covered at the beginning of this course, and you guys already know, right? We know that a byte is what, 8 characters? I mean, 8 bits. And it takes 8 bits to form a character. So 32 bits is 4 characters, right? Because you have 8 is 1 character, another 8, which is 16, another character. Another 8 is 24, which is a 3rd character, and another 8 bits is 32, which is a 4th character. So the 32-bit can do what? It can transfer, let's say, 4 characters at a time. The 64-bit can transfer what? 8 characters at a time. So those are the differences, whether your computer's a 32-bit system or a 64-bit system. 64-bit systems are run fast. They run faster than the 32-bit systems. So keep that in mind when you're buying your application, your programs to install. Because let's just say you have a computer that's 32 bits, and you go to the store and you buy the program, you find the program you need, but you buy the one that's for 64-bit. So when you try to install it on the computer that's a 32-bit, it's not going to install. Now, the other way around will work if you go and buy a 32-bit program and you install it on a 64-bit. The 64-bit will take the 32-bit, plus it will also take a 64-bit program. But understand, it cannot go from high to low. So when you're buying the applications, make sure you know what type of computers you have, whether they're 32-bit or 64-bit. Distribution models, let's see what they say here. Installer for desktop applications. Normally, what this is, class, when the program comes, let's say, let's keep it simple, on the CD. You buy Windows or you buy a payroll program and you have to install it. It's on that CD, and the way it's set up on that CD, they call that packaging. We don't do anything. We just go and buy the program. It already comes packaged by the manufacturer. And the package it's just all the multiple programs that are required to make that application work. So it's like a bundle. It's not just one program to make, let's say, the payroll program function. There's multiple supporting mini programs within that one. So it's they call it a package. They put all that in a package so you can see it as one application, even though there's multiple programs that compose the one application. And that's why they call it a distribution method. And normally they're set up like if you look at the CD, you see setup.exe. That's the packaging of setup. There's another one called MSI installer, and you'll see it when you go to the hard drive or to the CD and look at that application, and you look at the extension of it, and you see the packaging of it. We don't do anything other than double click and it'll start installing. The Mac packaging, their extension, instead of saying exe or MSI, for a Mac is going to say DMG or it's going to say PGK. And that's the way they bundle their applications. And Linux bundles theirs and call it a DEB, or they call it RPM. Okay, so anyway, again, it's the way they bundle the application, and this is the extensions that are given in a Windows, in a Mac, and in a Linux system. And then you have physical media versus downloadable. So physical media, you have it, you have your CD, you put it in there, you can do the install. Others are downloadable. You can purchase, let's say, your software online, and then what they'll do is they'll give you to download the product key of that program. So you download the product key, or they give you the product key in an email. And then all you have to do is just download the program. And when you start installing the program that you download from the internet, you click setup, or double click that program, it'll start installing. And then it was going to ask you for the key, and then you have it because whoever you bought it from gave it to you. You install it, and then it installs. And they have that available on the internet, for example, and anyone can download it. Anyone. So you may be wondering, well, if anyone can install it, don't they lose money? Because if anyone can install it, they didn't buy it. Well, yes, anybody can download it. I'm sorry, but they cannot install it because they don't have the product key. The product key is only given to the people that paid, let's say, with a credit card, and then the vendor sends you the product key in an email, and you have the product key. So that's another way to gain access to your program. And then you have another one called ISO Mountable. The ISO Mountable is the actual program that's been bundled up into what they call an ISO image. And you'll see it if you look at the CD. If it was on the CD, you'll see that it says ISO. And again, the ISO has that bundled program in it. You have to run a program against that ISO that will extract it from the ISO bundle, and then put it in one of these formats. By extracting it from the ISO, it either puts it in this format, or in this format if it's a Mac, or in this format. So the ISO bundles it even further than these packages here. It bundles the package in the ISO. So you just don't click on the ISO, automatically starts installing. You first have to extract the ISO to pull it into one of these bundles. Other things to consider: shadow IT and impact to business, licensing and compliance. Obviously, a business has to be compliant. They don't want to be running pirated software, right? So they have their licenses to be in compliance. Otherwise, if the vendor finds out, they can come and sue them, right? And it's not a good thing. What else do they have to do? User training and education. So they buy a specific application, and if it's a new process for the company, they have to train the users how to use it, right? So training and education. And then increase support requirements. So part of that training could be for the end users that are using the application, but maybe there's a higher level training for the technicians that will support the application. So increase support requirements. So how much training is required so employees can learn how to use the program? Otherwise, it's of no use. What else? Impact to the operation, deployment and support tools. So, of course, if you are going to deploy this program, is it going to require that users get off their computer so you can install this? It could interrupt their daily routine. So you may have to do it after hours or come in on the weekend to do the installation. Impact to device in the network. Resource consumption, use of background services. So this new application, is it going to bog down the existing system, or the existing system has enough capacity to take on a new application and still be running efficiently with all the other apps that it runs? And then the risk from faulty applications. So if you do put a faulty application, it could cause other applications that you're running to fail, because it could corrupt other areas of the memory, and other applications could start hanging up on you. So just make sure that your applications you're installing are bought from a legitimate source and they have not been corrupted. Because normally that's the case. The applications are good if you bought them from a reputable vendor, right? And then if it's a program that runs over the network, bandwidth usage, make sure that you have enough bandwidth so this program can send packages of data back and forth over the network. If you don't have enough bandwidth, the network's going to run very slow, and users are going to begin to complain. You know, it takes me a long time to access the file and to open the file and to save the file. So again, take into consideration these things as you start installing new programs. And if they are over the network, make sure that you have the network capacity as well, which is the bandwidth. So we looked at what class? System requirements for applications, operating system requirements for applications, distribution methods. How are you going to install? It's going to come in what form? In an EXE or in an MSI or in a DMG format. And then the other considerations we talked about, like the bandwidth and all these other requirements here, education and all these other things. All right, class, now let's look at topic C, troubleshoot Windows OS problems. So once Windows is up and running, you have an operating system that's supposed to run, and hopefully we won't have any problems, but if we do, let's see what we can look at. Firmware controlled, power on self-test, boot device priority. This is the BIOS that we talked about, right? I already mentioned about boot device. You go into the BIOS and you say, look at the first drive to find the operating system, and that first drive has to be the drive C. I don't want drive D to be the first drive because that's my CD, right? So you understand about that priority. Keep it in that sequence. The power on self-test, known as the post, this one checks that your components on your computer are functioning. It'll check that you have a keyboard, you have a mouse, how much memory you have, your hard drive, and it checks all those things. If one of those is not functioning properly, the post is going to beep a series of beeps and make display a message on your screen as well. For example, you forgot to connect a keyboard, it could tell you no keyboard present or something like that. So these are things that are controlled by the firmware. We don't do it. The firmware is built in, hard-coded in your computer system. What we do is the boot device priority, that we do set that. And then you have the boot manager, the boot configuration database. And then you have the legacy BIOS and NVR versus the EFI and GPT. So again, if you're using older computers, you're working with legacy stuff. If you're using the new ones, remember the UEFI? Well, you're working with GPT, not NVR, as I said earlier. And then Windows Load, you have kernel and drivers. So kernel and drivers, the kernel is the core of the operating system commands, or the core of the operating system instructions. Okay, the operating system is a very, very large program. It has thousands of lines of code in it. Well, that's what composes the kernel. That makes that is the actual operating system. And that's what runs when you turn on your system. And what comes with the kernel? Well, the configuration settings of the system, and some of those settings are the drivers. And what are the drivers? You already know. Those are the specific programs that make your components work, right? Like a driver for a printer, the driver for a network card, the driver for a graphics card, and so on. And what else do you have when Windows is loading up? Services and WinLogon. So the services, any program that's going to start automatically, remember at startup, if you were running certain programs at startup, it's going to have services that are linked to that program. Let's say the program was your antivirus protection. Well, there's going to be a service associated with that. That's going to load up at the time of the system coming up. If you had Adobe Acrobat, you want it to come up automatically. Well, there's a service that's tied into that as well. So any program that runs and loads up when your system comes up will have a service associated with it. And you remember last class, we looked at the services tab, and that's where the services are displayed for you. You need to go look at them. And then what's the WinLogon? That is the one. Once the system loads up, that is what you're going to see on your screen, asking you for a user ID and a password. At that point, your system loaded up correctly, You log in and you're in, and your computer's ready to be used by the user. If you start having problems with the systems coming up, well, you have to recover from that. So let's see here, advanced boot options, FA from the BIOS boot, and then shift, click restart from power icon with UEFI boot. So if you had the newer machines that run UEFI, restart from power. So in other words, turn off the computer and turn it back on. But you hold the shift key and then turn the computer off and then back on while holding the shift key. And that'll get you into a mode that allows you to boot up in a certain way to be able to get in. This, of course, is very important if you have a system that's not coming up. If it's not coming up, how can you get into the system to fix it, right? So by doing these things here, you come up in a mode that gives you these options. And let's see what those are. Startup settings, enable debugging, enable boot logging. If any errors are occurring while the system's coming up, it'll look at what the problem is, and then it'll put it in a log, and you can look at that log. It's stored in system in this Windows system folder, and it'll tell you any errors that are coming up, and this way you know what the problem is, so you can fix it. You can enable low resolution sometimes if it's a video device driver problem that's preventing the system coming up. If you do a low resolution, that means it won't load up the driver. It'll bring you up in an image that's a little bit blurry because you don't have the driver, but it's enough to get you in to fix the problem. And you can enable save mode. And save mode again is if you press, for example, some systems if you press the delete key, other systems I believe is the F5 key. And depending on what system model you have and what manufacturer, you'll find out what key you have to press, and that comes up in save mode. It doesn't load any of the drivers. Like I said, your display is not going to be very clear. But right now you said I don't care about that. I just care about getting into my system to go in there and take out what's causing my system to hang up and not come up. You can get into save mode with networking because let's say that the files you need to reinstall are on the network. So you want to get to the server to get those files and install them. Or you just say enable save mode with command prompt. This one is you get in and then at that point, then it comes up to that black screen, the command prompt. Remember last class we looked at command prompt where you can type in the commands if you know them, right? Like dir for directory, md to make directory. Here you could get into command mode, and in command mode you could say change directory, and then you would change to a directory to the folder where the file you need is located. And once you get there, then you can install that file to replace the corruption, for example. And then again, a disabled driver signature enforcement. If you happen to have a driver that's not signed, those are normally the drivers that for not so well-known devices. And sometimes if it's not signed, it could cause you problems. So you can just say, just disable looking for the signature. I know it's a good driver, so don't worry about looking for the special code on the driver. And then disable early launch and anti-malware protection. Sometimes a virus protection class, anti-malware protection, will stop you from installing a legitimate program. I've had that happen to me where I have to go in and I have to deactivate the antivirus program temporarily so I can do the installation of a legitimate program. And once I'm done, I go back and reactivate the antivirus program. So sometimes you have to do that. And then disable automatic restart after failure. So if it fails, you don't want it to try to come back up again. If it fails, you might want to shut it down because you just never know. You want to open up the case, look inside, whatever the case may be. And F10 will give you additional options. So this, again, is you're going to be working with this in troubleshooting mode. In normal circumstances, you won't be getting into this. And again, one more time, to get into this is how they specify here. Okay, system restore, configuring system protection, and using system restore. So one of the things that I also mentioned was the registry editor. And in the registry editor, you have all the configuration settings of the computer. Okay, and if something gets corrupted in your configuration, it's stored in the registry. Okay, and the registry has a backup within the registry, and if and if you say, I've configured this computer and it's working good, everything's working fine, that the new components I installed, I put the drivers and I test it and everything's working fine the way I want this to work. So what you do is you do what they call a system restore. They call it a restore point. And what it does, it takes the registry and it saves it. And at that time, it's saving a working configuration. Let's say that 2 or 3 days later, you install something and it causes your systems to start having problems. And you know that this new thing that you did changed your configuration, but now this change of the configuration is causing issues. Well, because you did the system restore, you go to the restore to system restore option, and it'll give you an opportunity to select a restore point, and it'll show you the date when you restored a good working configuration, and it'll recopy it over the current configuration, which is corrupted. The current one is corrupted with the one you had backed up, that you had restored. So that's what the system restore is to help you recover from configuration mishaps, from anything that gets corrupted in your configuration. And do keep in mind, when you do a system restore, it's only backing up the configuration settings. It is not your data. So don't confuse that with backing up your data. Your data is a totally separate thing, where you do a backup program that later on we'll talk about that to back up your data. This is only your configuration that makes your computer function. System restore. We looked at that. Okay, well, this one we looked at. Well, here, how I said to get these settings in Windows. Boot recovery puts that recovery backup that's already in the hard drive. If you select that option to do Windows recovery, then it'll display a Windows like this that is very similar to this type of Windows. This is, I believe, from Windows 8. The way you see it in Windows 10 or Windows 11, you see it like this, but it still has the same options in there. Startup, repair, uninstall, updates, UEFI firmware settings, startup and settings, command prompt, system restore. So it has all these options within the newer operating system. So creating recovery partition or startup disk, repair, startup repair in case your NVR record gets corrupted. You can repair it by once you do what they said here to do to get into this. If you have Windows 10 or 11, you get to here and you can do the repair. Options for reinstalling if you needed to reinstall, because more than just configurations got corrupted, things on your hard drive got corrupted, you can always reinstall over the corruption. And then the Windows recovery, again, command prompt. You can go to the command prompt, just the same here that it has command prompt as we saw earlier. Two different interfaces, but they both take you to these lower level areas of your disk to be able to recover. So the system restore, we looked at that, and now you have update and driver rollback. We've looked at that. We know what drivers are. If a driver gets corrupted, your equipment's not going to function properly anymore. So what do you have to do? You either have to update the driver or take out the driver and then install a new driver. So roll back Windows updates. Windows updates is, and I'll continue with the driver in a minute, but Windows updates is something that happens, for example, if you want to do it several times a week at night, they're fixes to the operating system that Microsoft discovers. And then you can specify when you want those updates to run. But once in a while, an update could cause you problems with your system or could cause you problems with an application. If that happens, then you would go to the option Install Updates. And one of the options here is to uninstall the updates. You could say, last night, one of the updates, it's causing a conflict with one of my applications. I have to take it out. So you go and select which update it is, and then you say uninstall, and it'll take it out. Okay. The drivers, that is again, you install, update the driver for let's say for the network card. And now your network card's not working fine. Well, you have to go to a device manager, select the network card, right click on it, select properties, and then it opens up. And one of the options that it shows you when it opens up is rollback driver. So it takes the new driver you installed that's causing you problems and puts in the other driver that was there before that was functioning. So you can always back out of something you've done. When it comes to the Windows updates causing you issues with your programs, you can back out of those by uninstalling them. Or if it's a driver, you can back out of that by going to the device manager, selecting the device, and then on that device, select the option to roll back the driver. System repair, reinstall, and re-image. Sometimes the whole operating system has crashed on you or has gotten corrupted to the point that just the configuration itself is not going to solve it anymore, that you need to install the whole OS. So here are several things. Recovery image. Remember, we already said that if you do an image, you can re-image your system in 5 minutes or so. So you can create a system image and have it on standby, that if a certain computer, it's just has crashed on you, you can put in a new hard drive and then get the image and reload it on the new hard drive, and you have a system in 5 minutes the way the old system used to be. That's one way to put your system back in functioning order, right? And then you have the reinstalling windows. You can say reset this PC, and you can say keep my files versus remove everything. So if you say so many files have gotten corrupted, I'm just flat out going to have to do a reinstall. So one way is, as we said before, do the upgrade. So you say, I don't want to disturb my applications. The only thing that's messed up is my operating system files. So you can put in the CD that has Windows 11 or Windows 10 and do install. And then here in the install, it's going to ask you, keep my files. So if you do keep my files, then you're saying only upgrade my operating system. Only upgrade the operating system files. Leave my programs intact, don't touch them. Okay? The other one is, this machine is totally corrupt. The files are totally messed up. We're just going to come from the backup. Well, then you can say remove everything. So in this case, it'll delete all the files and it'll install a fresh copy of the operating system with no files. And then it's your job to go back in there and install the files, maybe from a backup that you already had saved from a tape drive or something. So two options. One is I want to keep my programs intact, the reset. The other one is wipe out everything. I want to start scratch, like if it was a new computer system. So the boot issues, one more time, is what can happen here: failure to boot or invalid boot disk. Check the physical connection and boot device priority. The boot device priority is an easy one already, because if you have the CD or DVD as the number one in the boot, when you turn on your computer, it wants to find Windows 10 or 11 on the CD, DVD. It's not going to be there. That's the reason we say boot priority. Put the C drive at the top so you don't get an error. And then, of course, do make sure that the hard drive is working and that the proper cable is connected, just like the last class, right? When you put the hard drives back in there, what did you have to do? You had to connect the cable to the disk and to the motherboard, right? Let's say it's a system you worked on recently and the tech could have forgotten to connect the cable to the motherboard or to the hard drive. So check those things. No operating system found. You start up and repair or Windows recovery command that we already looked at earlier over here. A graphical interface fails to load. You have a black screen. Check the boot options. MS config. Check that option. Check for disk activity, completion of Windows updates. Maybe a Windows updates didn't finish installing, and it's causing your system not to come up properly. And then run SFC to verify system files. And this SFC command, you just run it, for example, at the command prompt. Just type in SFC space, and let's say it was the C drive. Say C:, and then it'll go and run a system file check on your operating system files to see if you have any corruptions. And if you do, you may have to come back over here and do a keep my files and do a reset and install the system files again. So it's a command to confirm that the Windows operating system files are functioning. It's one that you may find yourself using, once in a while. A very good command, SFC. That's the name of the command. If you have a slow profile load, pre-post login, verbose status messaging. So you could have maybe a lot of programs starting up in your startup, and it could take time for your system to come up. Like I said, on mine, I had Teams, and Teams take a long time to load, and I had it as startup, so Teams had to load up before I would get the prompt to log in. So look at those things. And then, of course, you can't rebuild the Windows profiles. And again, we already said a fresh install or reset of your system. Troubleshoot performance issues, sluggish performance diagnosis. If everything's slow, people are complaining, what could be going on? A task manager, resource performance monitor. We looked at that, right, class? Recently, last class. So look at task manager. Remember, one of the options was what? Performance. And remember, it tells you how hard you're working the CPU. How much memory are you using? You can also find that in Performance Monitor under Computer Management and the utilization of the resources like the CPU, the RAM, the hard drive. Sometimes you have too many things going on in memory. You might want to reboot so it can clear everything that was cluttering your memory. So again, low memory or disk space. If in fact it is low memory or disk space, that right there is telling you there's a reason that the computer's running slow. It lacks the resources. So you might want to say, I see that it's low memory, so I'm going to go buy some more memory sticks. And now you know where the memory sticks are located. So you say, I have 2 already in there that were for 16 gig. Let me go buy another 2 so I can upgrade it to 32 gig. And now my system begins to operate normally again. Or I try another hard drive because my disk drive is getting full. Okay, so those are things that could cause things to run slow. So common troubleshooting steps: apply updates and defragment the hard disk. So now we know defragment makes your disk run more efficiently, right? Apply updates. So the automatic updates, they're there for a reason. It's to make your system better and to protect you from security issues. So take the automatic updates from Windows. They're fixing issues that they know that are with the Windows operating system. Verify requirements and add resources, right? Just make sure, do I need more memory? Disable startup items. Remember, we saw that also. I have too many programs starting up at boot up. Let me go in here and startup tab under Task Manager. There's a tab called Startup, and check the ones you do not want to be loading up. It has the option to disable from them coming up. And check security issues and scanner performance. You know, your scanner, is your virus protection kicking in the middle of the day? That's going to make the user's computer run very, very slow because the priority is going to be with your virus protection running the scan. You say, I don't want to run the scanner during production hours. We want to run the scan after 5 o'clock. And then what else? Test for power management issues as well. Make sure that, especially if it's a laptop and you're not having your battery pack getting drained, from the power and things like that. Troubleshoot system faults. Sometimes, let's say when you install a new driver or you update the driver, and then all of a sudden your system begins to blue screen like that. They call that the blue screen of death. Uh, all of a sudden you're working, all of a sudden this pops up, and in essence, it's rebooting your system. And it interrupts what you're working on, and hopefully not corrupt the transaction you were working on. And then you say, well, I just installed a new device driver. Now this is happening, so you can assess that this new driver is causing you the problem, so you can go in there and take them out, and it could eliminate this blue screen of death. That's one scenario. So here you can see frequent shutdown, system instability. What else? Blue screen of death right here, PSOD. System restore or update driver rollback, because the driver that you installed when you upgrade it, really it doesn't make your equipment work better. It actually created problems, so you got to back it out. So go to Device Manager, select the device where you updated the driver, and then select rollback. Take it out, and it'll put the working driver that was there before. Hardware diagnostics. There's tools for you to run hardware diagnostics. And then you have Windows memory diagnostics. And then you have the SFC to check for system files, to check the system file and make sure they're not corrupted. And the system files are what? Those are the Windows files. And then if there's an error that's coming up, or let's say here in the blue screen, it shows error numbers here. Jot them down and do a lookup. Go to Microsoft website and do a search or Google it. And then you have USB issues as well. Power and selective suspended faults, USB controller resource warnings. So any error messages that point to USB, make sure those USB ports are functioning properly. Maybe one's shorting out or just not working good anymore. And then you have the troubleshoot application and service fault issues. So these are the actual programs. So you've gone beyond your operating system. The operating system now is working fine. Now, what programs are not working? Applications are hanging up, they're crashing. So recover files and unsafe data. First of all, so make sure you don't lose any of your information. So back up your files. Research the event logs. I did mention that on the computer management, one of the options there is event viewer. Remember I said, look at your event viewer, because there's logs there. One of the logs is system log. Another log is application log. Okay, so you may want to go into the application log, and then it gives you a list of events that are occurring. And if you see an entry that has the red dot with an X, that's a hard-coded error. So double click that entry, and it'll give you details as to why that error is occurring. So do rely on the event viewer. It'll help you pinpoint where the problem is. And then you can uninstall, reinstall, or update applications. Applications can be uninstalled. If you go to the application under Add Remove Programs, if you do search Add Remove Programs, or you go to Control Panel, it's got Add Remove Programs. It gives you a list of your programs, your applications. Right click on the one that you suspect is giving you problems. And it has one of the options is to uninstall, so you can uninstall. And some of those have the option to repair, and you can repair. If you select repair, it's going to ask you to put in the CD of that application, and it'll pull in the files to replace corrupted files in the application. Services not starting. So where do you go? You go to Task Manager, Services tab, and look at the list of services. And the one that's not starting, if you got a message stating the service is not running, and in a Task Manager, the Services tab, look for that service. And once you see it, what do? You right click, and it has the option to do what? To start. Because maybe it stopped for whatever reason. So right click it and select start. It restarts the service, and the program begins to work again. Check dependencies and permissions. So make sure that the person that's running the program has the permissions to run that program. Dependencies is that if you're running a program and it's using a certain service, we already said make sure that service is running. But sometimes that service needs another service to be running for that service to run. And they call that a dependency. So there's a service that has to be running before this program runs, because the service of this program relies on this other service. Those are called dependencies. But you would get the error message that the service is not running, and you would go and start it up, and that service that is being depended on, once it comes up, the other service comes up and the program begins to work. Those are dependencies. A service depending on another service. And then you have time drift. Time drift is where the clock on your computer goes off and is not synchronized with the clock on your networking equipment, like your servers and your routers and your switches. Failure of authentication, backup, and other daytime sensitive services. Synchronize to consistent time source. Let's say that the computer is off by 5 minutes from the server. It may not allow you to log in. Even though the network parts are working, you have, a good user ID and a password, everything is good. Just a simple fact that you're off time-wise by 5 minutes from the server, you won't be able to connect. So you need to correct that problem. There is a protocol called NTP, which is a network time protocol, and that goes out to the world clock out on the internet and resets your clock and synchronizes. Some companies have the NTP running on the servers locally, so then you can run the NTP on the user's computer, and then it'll synchronize there internally within your company. Running NTP to synchronize, but something you would never imagine would cause you problems connecting and logging in. It can cause problems. Yeah, being off time-wise. So that has to be synchronized. And it's good to be aware of that, because you could be troubleshooting everything else and everything else works, and you could be baffled. You could say, oh my God, everything works. What's going on? Well, something as simple as the time being off by a few minutes. So, okay, class, we reviewed what here? The boot process, the boot recovery tools and system restore, update and driver rollback, system repair, reinstall and reimage, troubleshoot boot and profile issues, troubleshoot system fault issues, troubleshoot application and service fault issues. So we saw the things that for us to look at to make sure that our operating system is running and that our programs or applications within the operating system is running, and make sure that everything is compliant, right? Like make sure we have enough memory, enough hard drive space, and all those things to make sure that everything is up and running. And we saw what things we can look at to resolve any problems that are coming up. So Windows OS problems, class. So having said that, this concludes the lecture for the day. We're going to break for labs, and I will be sending you some labs tomorrow, and of course be expecting the third class, which will come in a video lecture format. So at this point in time, class, let's go ahead and break for lab, and we'll conclude the lecture. Okay. All right.